So let's get started here with the implementation of WDS onto this machine file1.company.pri. This machine here is the server we'll be using for a variety of different file server-oriented tasks, WDS being one of them. The WDS services don't really consume that much in terms of system resources, so if you wanted to put it on your file server, you probably could. If I come over here to the dashboard and add roles and features to just show you the wizard, you'll notice that I've already gone through the implementation of installing WDS onto this machine. This is the not terribly exciting part of the installation. Rather, instead, let's take a look over here under Tools at the Windows Deployment Services tool itself, where we would go through the post-installation configuration of WDS. Now, WDS, as I said, is kind of the combination of a couple of different solutions all into one. We have to have WDS itself because that's the tool where the images are stored. That's the tool where the images are delivered from. But I have to have also a way to get machines connected up to WDS and bootstrapped into that WinPE environment. So a large portion of this initial configuration is not only getting WDS up and running, getting the different kinds of images pulled into WDS, but also the connection over to our DHCP services as well. Let me come over here to our servers node, and then if I drop down, we can right-click on file1.company.pri and go through the initial configuration wizard. This is not by any means the comprehensive configuration wizard. All it does is really just get this machine barely online so that we can go through other configurations here in just a second. What we need to do here first is, by clicking on Next, identify what kind of installation we want to do for this instance of WDS. Now, in a lot of environments where you're deploying machines and those machines are going to be on the same Active Directory domain as the WDS server, well, you can use integrated with Active Directory here. But there is also the ability down here to create a standalone server, which does not necessarily preclude you from automatically inserting these machines you'll be provisioning into your Active Directory domain. Now, more often than not, a lot of people would like to create a separate server that's perhaps even on a separate network. Maybe you've got some build tank in the basement of your office building where you can go through deploying operating systems onto 20 or 30 machines at once. Well, a lot of times the network team prefers to keep the kinds of multicast traffic that WDS can use for that activity away from the rest of the network. It can kind of oversaturate the network if it's configured in the wrong way. And so for that reason, you'll see a lot of situations where standalone servers are configured that are disconnected from Active Directory. But later on, as we go through the configuration of these machines, you can tell the machine to connect to your Active Directory once it's provisioned. I'll assume here, for the sake of simplicity, that we'll go through an integrated with Active Directory configuration here. It kind of makes a few items just a little bit simpler. And then configure here our path to our remote installation folder. Now, I'll put this on the C drive, but this can contain a lot of content because you're going to be putting operating system images on it, so make sure you have plenty of space in whatever this location is. You'll get a little error message here if you try to choose the system volume as opposed to a different volume. Now here we have the next option of determining how we want our Pixie server to respond to incoming clients as they may attempt to request an image from our WDS solution. By default, we won't actually respond to any client computers, or I could choose to respond to known or known and unknown client computers. Remember that any machine where in the BIOS you've configured the network boot higher up in the boot order than perhaps your DVD or your hard disk, any of those machines will attempt to connect to your Pixie server first before any of the other boot options that exist. And so you have to kind of be careful with this configuration here. I tend to set mine to known and unknown, but require administrator approval for unknown computers. This ensures that any of the known computers that boot into Pixie will have the option of downloading an OS image. But also any of the unknown computers, those that are not in the Active Directory yet, those that perhaps you just pulled out of the box and set on a desk somewhere and plugged in, those machines you can also deliver an operating system image to, but only if you click the Name and Approve button to name the machine and approve that installation. I'll choose Next here to go through the next step in this process, and that will go through actually doing the initial configuration of Windows Deployment Services. We still actually have quite a few other configurations we've got to do for WDS to even function. The next step is to actually identify what kind of images we want to import here onto this server. And for our purposes, there are actually two different kinds of images that we're interested in. The first of which will be a boot image. This boot image will be that little micro version of Windows, the Windows PE instance, that bootstraps a client to the point where it can then request the install image, which is the second type of image we're going to import. These boot and install images are in fact available on the Windows DVD media. And I've taken the liberty of copying that DVD media here to the E drive of this file server in a location here called IT and then OS images. So here's the Windows 8.1 ISO file, which I've also unpacked into a folder, which you'll want to do as well, into this same location. So this is just the contents of that ISO file, but not actually in the ISO file itself. I want to direct your attention here to the sources, and then down here at the bottom, we are looking for a couple of WIM files. The first of which is the boot.wim file, which I'll find right here. And the second of which will be the install.wim file. I'll show you here in just a second. Boot.wim is the contents of Windows PE. It's essentially all the different files that correspond to Windows PE in a little database zipped together that can be deployed in order to bootstrap that client. Now the install.wim file, if I scroll down just a bit further, install.wim is Windows itself. And so the entirety of a Windows installation is comprised here in this single WIM file, install.wim. It is both of these two images that are necessary to be imported here into our WDS infrastructure to, number one, allow the machines to boot, and then number two, deploy that operating system to them. Let's go now here and then connect up to this location so that I can then import in these couple of images. By checking this box here, I can add those images to my server now. And then I'll need to provide a path to that location, which in my case will be the E drive. If I come down here to E, and then IT, and then OS images, and then the unpacked folder here. So let me click OK, and then Next. And I'm going to create an image group here called Windows 8.1 Enterprise, and choose Next. Once I do that, you'll see we found one image here. That's the Windows 8.1 Enterprise image, as well as one boot image. I just showed you both of those. And if I click Next, it will go through the process of adding both the boot image and the install image here to our Windows Deployment Services location. Now, just a second ago, I showed you that there is that C remote install folder that we created as kind of the WDS working folder where all of its content gets stored. One of the things that this process is doing is actually, if I come down here and bring up the C drive and then go to that remote install folder, you'll find that it's created kind of a framework of different files that will later be dropping content into. Not the least of which here is this images folder where in the background we are now going through the process of copying all the content from that remote location here into this images folder. And if I can click in there, since this machine is working so diligently, you'll see there is my Windows 8.1 Enterprise image, and now we're going through all the creation of this extra content. So this will populate itself as it goes through completing the task, and we'll bring those images here onto this machine so that we can now use them here on our machine file1.company.pri. In fact, let's take a look at these images. Here's the boot image, and here is the install image, both of which that we located. This install image is Windows 8.1 Enterprise. This is the copy of Windows that I would later deploy out to a machine. Then the boot image is what would be used to actually boot that machine so that it could actually receive that copy of Windows. These two images in concert are what are necessary to get WDS to deploy an operating system out to an awaiting client.